They say grief fades with time, but time has only carved deeper echoes in Alina's life. Ever since her twin brother, Elias, died in a tragic accident 5 years ago, she has lived in a blur, existing, not living. She works at the community library in a forgotten town, shelved among dust and silence, speaking only when necessary, feeling only when memory catches her off guard. Her parents stopped talking about Elias. They had to. It was the only way to survive. But grief has a strange way of circling back through unexpected doors. One rainy November afternoon, a stranger walks into the library. He's about her age, worn at the edges, with restless eyes and a voice that feels unsettlingly familiar. He says his name is Jude. There's something about him that scratches at the edges of her soul, something Elias-like in his gaze, in the way he instinctively reaches for the exact books Elias used to love. He even knows her name before she tells him. At first, she suspects coincidence. Then she convinces herself it's madness. But as Jude keeps showing up at the library in her dreams, on the street her fragile reality begins to slip. He remembers moments only she and Elias ever shared. He hums songs Elias used to sing under his breath. When she confronts him, Jude reveals the impossible truth. He received Elias's heart in a transplant, and with it, pieces of Elias's memories. And more hauntingly, an emotional pull he cannot explain toward her. Alina doesn't believe in fate. She believes in books and science and numbers, not in signs or soul ties. But the universe doesn't wait for belief. As the two grow closer, so does the past. Together they must face Elias's death all over again, only this time with new questions. Why did Jude nearly die that night Elias did? Why did he dream of her face before ever meeting her? And why is it that the more she tries to let Elias go, the more she falls for the one who carries his heart? Their story is not a romance born out of convenience or grief, it is a reckoning. A journey of unraveling trauma, confronting fate, and discovering whether love born through loss can truly stand on its own. As Alina learns to live again and Jude learns to understand the borrowed emotions inside him, they find themselves asking the hardest question. Are we destined to love someone, or do we choose them again and again? Jude stood at the edge of Alina's porch, his hands trembling inside his jacket pockets, the cold biting at his skin, though he barely noticed. She hadn't spoken in minutes, only stared at him like he'd just torn open the earth beneath her. He didn't blame her. He would have run too if their roles were reversed. He didn't mean to say it not like that. Not I think I feel him when I'm near you. Not I see you in my dreams, and I know it's not mine. But he said it, and now there was no one saying it. Alina finally opened the door wider without a word, as if that small gesture was enough. And it was. For now. Inside, the warmth of the house wrapped around them like old memories, ones she thought she had buried beneath layers of silence. The air smelled faintly of cedarwood and dust, and something else she hadn't smelled in years, Elias's cologne, or at least the cheap imitation of it he always insisted on wearing. She blinked hard. No. Memory plays tricks when your heart is fractured. Jude sat across from her in the kitchen, where Elias once threw popcorn into the air, daring gravity to intervene. Jude didn't know that, of course. Not consciously, but his hand absent-mindedly reached for the drawer where Elias kept the cinnamon sugar. Alina watched in frozen horror as Jude shook a little into his coffee without asking. No one knew that habit. You've been here before, she said, barely a whisper. No, Jude replied, voice hoarse. But it's like, I know where things are. I can't explain it. Your hallway creaks the third board down. There's a scar on your bedroom door. The attic smells like rain. She closed her eyes. He was right. Too right. Jude didn't try to comfort her. He simply looked down, ashamed. I didn't ask for this. I didn't even know who your brother was when I got the call. I was dying. I just said yes. You shouldn't apologize for being alive, she said, more to herself than to him. But I don't know what this is. I don't know what you are to me. And that was the question that hovered in every room they entered together. Were they strangers, bonded only by a heart passed through tragedy? Or were they something more, an echo of a love that never got to exist? In the weeks that followed, Alina found herself orbiting Jude like a moon unsure of its planet. She tried to stay away, but something in her kept bending back toward him. They took long walks at dusk without speaking. She showed him Elias's favorite bench at the lake. He brought her a book she hadn't read since she was 14, with her notes still scribbled in the margins. Sometimes, he'd say something Elias once said. A weird idiom. A childhood joke. Alina would flinch, sometimes cry, sometimes laugh. It never got easier. One night, under the brittle December stars, she asked, Do you feel you when you're with me? Or do you feel him? Jude looked pained. I don't know where he ends and I begin. But I know I want to be here. I know I care about you. Her heart thudded unevenly. Grief had taught her caution. But it had also taught her that waiting for guarantees meant watching life slip through your fingers. She stepped closer. Then be here. Not as Elias. Not as a ghost. Just you. He nodded slowly. Then let me figure out who that is. With you. And so they did. Not with easy answers. Not with fairy tale certainty. But with the awkward grace of two people thrown into something bigger than themselves. Elias was always there between sentences, in quiet moments, in songs on the radio. But eventually, Jude became more than the boy with Elias's heart. He became Jude, someone who collected moments gently, who didn't try to replace what was lost but honored it. And Alina, for the first time in 5 years, laughed without guilt, cried without drowning, and chose to love again not because fate demanded it, but because something in her heart finally said yes. Winter softened into early spring like someone relearning how to breathe after a long cry. The snow peeled off the sidewalks. The library's garden beds began to show green beneath the tired soil. And Alina, once draped in layers of silence, found herself humming again small, barely there tunes that Jude noticed and smiled at without comment. They had not labeled what they were. They didn't need to. It existed in the space between them, honest, delicate, unforced. But something was coming. Not all stories drift gently into peace. Some carry unfinished echoes, and this one still had questions to answer. It began with a letter Jude received in a crumpled envelope, no return address, only a hospital stamp. Inside was a discharge summary from the night of his transplant. His heart had begun to fail with no clear reason. It read like a medical riddle, but what caught his attention was a name a nurse who had scribbled in the margin. Recipient transferred from Ridgewell Medical under urgent consent override. He didn't tell Alina at first. He didn't want to open old wounds. But as the days passed, something gnawed at him, a suspicion that maybe Elias's death hadn't been entirely an accident. Maybe someone chose to save Jude before Elias had even been declared gone. The night he told her, it shattered the calm they had built. "You're saying someone picked you?" Alina asked, her voice sharp, her body pulling back as if instinctively creating space. "Like, before my parents even knew?" "I don't know what I'm saying," Jude replied, clutching the letter. "But it doesn't feel right. I need to know. Not because I regret being alive, but because you deserve to know if someone made that decision for you." The next week unraveled in hospital records, tense calls, old staff who had retired or relocated. Most doors stayed shut. But one opened. They met her in a retirement home on the edge of town. Nurse Rosemary Ellison. Fragile hands. Clear eyes. She remembered Jude. She remembered Elias. "I'm not supposed to talk about this," she said, more to the ceiling than to them. But sometimes truth matters more than rules. What she told them was this. Elias's brain scan had come back with no activity. Time was critical. Jude, barely clinging to life in another hospital, was the best match. Consent from the parents hadn't arrived yet. It was a gray area. A rushed decision. "Your brother saved him," she said, looking straight at Alina. "And I pushed it through." Alina didn't speak the whole way home. She stared out the window, expression unreadable. When they got back, she went straight to the attic. Jude followed slowly, unsure if he was welcome. There, beneath a dusty sheet, was Elias's old record player. She turned it on. Music crackled through the static. It was a song Elias used to play when they were little, a soft piano piece that rose and fell like a memory. "He would have said yes," she whispered. "That's the worst part. I know him. I know he would have told them to take his heart. But no one asked us. They just did it. And I hated you for that for a long time. Even when I didn't know why." Jude stepped forward, carefully, like approaching an injured animal. "I would give it back if I could. But I'm not him. I don't want to live his life. I want mine. I want us. But only if you can separate the two." She turned slowly, tears tracing her cheeks, not from anger, but from exhaustion. "I don't want him back," she said. "Not anymore. I want to carry him with me. And I want to walk forward with you." In that attic, under a slanted roof filled with the shadows of old summers, they held each other, not to replace what was lost, but to hold what had been found. Some days, they still felt the ghosts, the songs, the shared smile. But they stopped asking if it was fate or chance. It didn't matter anymore. They had become something neither grief nor destiny could define. They had chosen each other. Because some stories aren't about moving on. Spring melted into full bloom. The town wore colors again, petals bursting open on trees that once stood bare, children racing bicycles past the library steps, and laughter slipping through windows that had long remained closed. But even in beauty, healing was never a straight line. Grief didn't simply dissolve. It lingered in the pauses, in the things left unsaid, in the sudden tightness in Alina's chest when she saw a photo of Elias buried in an old box, in the way Jude sometimes still reached for his chest, as if trying to remember whether the beat beneath his skin was his or borrowed. One night, as they sat on the back porch wrapped in a blanket of silence, Jude asked, "Do you think we'd still have met if this hadn't happened?" Alina looked up at the stars. They were especially bright that night, the kind Elias used to say looked like holes poked in heaven. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "But I think the universe finds strange ways to stitch people together, even when it hurts." He nodded slowly, the air thick with something unspoken. In time, they began to make new traditions, ones that belonged only to them. Sunday mornings meant pancakes and books read aloud on the floor. They planted a small garden behind the library, where children would come help dig and learn about roots, just like Elias had wanted to do before. Everything. Alina began leading community storytelling nights. Jude, once unsure where he belonged, started working with transplant support groups, listening more than speaking, but learning where his voice fit. And yet, one final thread remained untied. Elias's birthday was approaching. It loomed like a storm neither of them could stop. Alina hadn't visited his grave since the funeral. She couldn't. Every time she tried, her feet froze halfway down the road. But this year, she didn't want to stay frozen. "I want you to come with me," she told Jude one morning quietly. "Not as a replacement. Not as a symbol. Just as you." So they went. The cemetery was quiet, dressed in wind and birdsong. Alina carried 3 things: a worn photo of her and Elias at age 7, a folded note she'd written 2 years ago and never sent, and a single blue wildflower, his favorite, because he once said it looked like freedom. She stood before the stone, Jude beside her but a few steps back, letting her have her moment. "I've been angry at you," she said aloud, her voice shaking. "I've missed you. I've hated that you left me. But I know now you didn't. Not really." She placed the photo against the base of the headstone, then the flower, then the note. The wind caught it for a moment before it settled, as if the air itself wanted to read her goodbye. "I'm okay," she added softly. "I'm getting okay. And I think you'd like him. You'd probably tease him a lot." She turned and smiled through her tears at Jude, who offered only a soft, steady nod. They left hand in hand. That night, she dreamt of Elias, not the tragedy, not the hospital, but just him, alive, laughing, running up the hill behind their childhood home. At the top, he turned and waved at her, and behind him stood Jude, not as a mirror, but as something new, something whole. In the months that followed, life didn't get perfect. But it got honest. Alina wrote again. Jude laughed more. They argued sometimes, but with the safety of knowing neither would leave. Their love was not simple. It was layered with history, with pain, with beauty, with truth. And one evening, long after the stars returned and the world had quieted, Jude rested his head against Alina's and whispered, "Whatever brought me here, I'm glad it was you." A year passed like a breath held too long, and then finally released. The small town that had once held only sorrow for Alina began to shimmer with something unfamiliar: peace. She no longer walked with her shoulders tight or eyes lowered, waiting for Elias's absence to greet her at every turn. He was still gone. That had not changed. But his memory had transformed, no longer a wound, but a part of her spine, something that kept her upright rather than pulling her down. Jude had changed too. His face held more certainty now. The restless guilt that once haunted his every move had softened. He stopped asking if he deserved his second chance. He started living like he had one. He found work helping others who were navigating post-transplant identity confusion, not as a counselor, but as a quiet voice in dark hallways. He didn't claim wisdom. He only offered presence. They had grown a rhythm. Not perfect. Real. One Friday evening, just as the sky painted itself in deep oranges and lilacs, Jude found Alina on the roof of the library, where she liked to sit with her coffee and the sound of birds. He climbed up clumsily, holding a small box in his hands. "Is that what I think it is?" she asked, smirking. He handed her the box without a word. Inside wasn't a ring. It was a compass, vintage, gold-rimmed, slightly scratched. The needle wobbled at first, then pointed true north. "I used to think my life had no direction," Jude said. "Then I met you, and you didn't just give me a path. You gave me meaning." She stared at it, moved in a way words couldn't touch. Are you asking me to follow this with you? I'm asking you to walk beside me, wherever it points. And she nodded, slow and certain. Then let's keep walking. But not every love story ends with kisses under fireworks or perfectly timed music. Sometimes they end in quiet things, like warm hands clasped together at dusk, like the sound of laughter in a shared kitchen, like the first time Alina looked in the mirror and no longer saw a grieving sister, but a woman fully alive. Like the first time Jude stopped hearing Elias's heartbeat and realized it was his own. They didn't erase the past. They didn't rewrite the pain. They honored it, layered it into their lives like roots beneath a strong tree. It didn't control them. It held them steady. One morning, years later, Jude woke before Alina. He made coffee, fed the cat they swore they wouldn't adopt, and slipped out the door with a notebook. He walked to the hill behind the old school, where a bench now stood with a brass plaque. Elias Hart, lover of sky, runner of wild paths, forever remembered. Jude sat quietly. He didn't come to ask permission anymore. He came to share. Hey, he said softly, resting his hand on the backrest. She's okay. We're okay. He looked up at the sky, the same blue Elias once ran beneath, and smiled. I just thought you'd want to know. And then he left, walking home not with the weight of another man's life, but with the fullness of his own. Because destiny might have started their story, but love finished it. Together. Always.